So I will confess to you that I don't want to celebrate Christmas. But let me finish. I don't want to celebrate Christmas yet. I love Christmas. It is indeed the most wonderful time of the year. But I don't like to skip Thanksgiving. And so, when those first decorations go up in the stores, you start seeing the ads, I start going Grinch. Not because I don't like Christmas, but just because I don't want to skip Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving is a powerfully important holiday for us. And I just don't want to skip it. Friday night we were talking about Thanksgiving meals, and we were reminded that in the Old Covenant, God established Thanksgiving as a regular part of the year for his people. That regularly, frequently, they would be celebrating together, giving thanks to him, and having Thanksgiving meals. And so after Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, I'm ready to put up decorations. I'm ready to turn on the station that's been playing Christmas songs for several weeks. I'm ready to celebrate it. I'm just not ready yet. But have you noticed that there are people who seem to be thankful all the time? There are people for whom Thanksgiving is not a season, it's a way of life. It's the way they look at, the way they think about life. And so we see them around us. There are people who seem to be thankful all the time, and we wonder what is the secret. How did they get to be like that? Where is the door? You know that daytime game show, Let's Make a Deal, and people get really excited depending on which door they choose, right? You choose what's behind door number 1, what's behind door number 2, and what's behind door number 3. And Thanksgiving is what happens when you choose the right door. And so we see these people who seem to be thankful all the time, and we think, well, they must have found the right door. We begin to watch them, we begin to try to learn something from their experience, and we decide that we know what door they found to gratitude. We decide that they're thankful because they found the door of abundance. That they're thankful because they have an abundant supply of good things in their life. And so we try the door of accumulation by trying to get more and more good things. And if you don't believe that that's the door to being thankful and being successful and being happy, all you have to do is look at the ads. I mean, I love a Chevrolet. Isn't that what it says? You know, that's just going to be the secret for happiness, not only for you, but for your entire family. Or it's the perfume. It says it in French, but life is beautiful is what it says. If you pick the right perfume, or maybe it's jewelry, or maybe it's the house or the clothes that you wear, whatever it is, we want to accumulate an abundant supply of good things because we have come to believe that that's the door to gratitude. And well, you know, if my life were full of really good things, then wouldn't I be thankful all the time? And so we try the door of accumulation and discover that it is not the door to gratitude, it's the door to dissatisfaction. You know why? Because you never have enough. If the secret to being happy for you, if the door that you're trying to open to be thankful is a door of accumulation, then you have this desire and need to want to continue to accumulate. It's like a paper cup that has a small hole in it. And you just put all the water or whatever else you put in your paper cup. I'm not going to ask you about that this morning. But whatever you're putting in the paper cup to drink, but it has a small hole and it just leaks. Just no matter how much you put in, there's never, ever enough. And so we discovered that this is the wrong door. This is not the door to gratitude. Accumulating lots of good things in our lives is not the door to gratitude. So we look again. We look again at people who seem to be thankful all the time. We realize, okay, well, maybe it's not the door of accumulation, but we think that they're thankful because they've convinced themselves that things are better than they really are. You see, we think that the door that they're trying to use to gratitude is the door of magic thinking, wishing really hard. Because we want to believe that indeed Disney movies are true. And if you wish hard enough, it's real. And so we try magic thinking. We try to convince ourselves. We look around and we see there are a lot of things in our lives that are not particularly all that great. There are many things in our lives that we don't like, many things that are just bad things. They're just not good. But we believe that with magic thinking, we can convince ourselves that the things that are bad in our lives really are good things. And with magic thinking, therefore, we can fool ourselves or wish ourselves into gratitude and into being thankful. And so we try that door to gratitude. And we only discover that magic thinking is not the door to gratitude. It's the door to disillusionment. Because wishing something were true doesn't make it true. That's the way it happens in the movies. That's not the way it is in real life. And so we're left with wondering, what then is the door to gratitude? How do we live a life that's thankful, like the people who seem to be thankful all the time? Well, there's an example I'd like for us to look at together. It's recorded in the book of Daniel in chapter 6. We're going to read some verses together out of Daniel chapter 6, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's behind these verses. Daniel chapter 6, beginning with verse 1. Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces. And he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. The king also chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs. But they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked. So King Darius signed the law. But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room, with its windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he always had done, giving thanks to his God. I want you to remember a little bit about what leads up to these verses recorded in chapter 6 of the book of Daniel. Remember that about 600 years before the birth of Christ, the Babylonians came and laid siege to the city of Jerusalem. And they took away many of the promising young people. And included in that group was Daniel and 3 of his friends, whom we have come to know by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Later, the leader of Judah, of Jerusalem, rebelled again against the Babylonian king, and he came back. This time he destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed Judah, killed the king, set his son up as a ruler in his place, and from then on, for many years, then the nation of Judah was under the Babylonian Empire. Meantime, Daniel and many of his friends, people who were a part of the royal family, they were the well-to-do, they were the well-educated, they were the healthy ones, they were the promising young leaders. Probably Daniel, at the time that he was taken off into Babylonian exile, was about 13 or 14 years old. And he and his 3 friends, particularly according to the book of Daniel, were careful to try to remain faithful to God as they followed through on what was being assigned to them in Babylonia. And so when they got there, they were put into a special training regimen and a special diet regimen. They were taught the language, they were taught the culture, they were taught the history. They were all given new names, including Daniel, and they were given a new diet. And you may remember that one of the first things Daniel did was to say, hey, you know, this kind of food's not the healthiest kind, let's try this instead. And when he followed through on the diet, he compared him and his friends to the others on the other diet, and they saw that he was correct. So Daniel was trying to be faithful even in this new place, even in exile. You may recall also that he was faithful to God as God gave him the opportunity to correctly interpret one of the dreams of the ruler at the time, who was not Darius. It was an earlier ruler, Nebuchadnezzar. And then later on, as Daniel remained in exile and captivity, he continued to be faithful, and his friends did as well. You may recall that one of the tests that came for faithfulness was how they were going to pray and worship, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were brought up on charges because they didn't follow the rules according to Babylonia. Remember the famous experience that's described in the book of Daniel, where as a penalty they're thrown into a fiercely fiery furnace, and they are rescued and come out. They don't even smell of smoke, according to the scripture. And it got everybody's attention that they had remained faithful. Daniel as well. And so now we come up to chapter 6. There's been a couple of rulers that have passed, because nearly 70 years have passed since Daniel was first brought to Babylonia by the time we get to chapter 6. And so now Daniel is probably in his lower 80s. So he's been there for a long time, but he's remained faithful. He's remained faithful both to God and to his new assignment. And what is his reward for faithfulness? The people around him are jealous and betray him. Why? Because he's faithful. I don't know if you noticed it in the description that I read, but they tried to find a reason to accuse him before the king, but they couldn't find any corruption in him. He always remained trustworthy, he always remained faithful, he always remained loyal, and he was good at his job. He was good at his assignment. He did so well that the king, Darius now, at this time, Darius the king, has decided that he might just make him in charge of all of them. And so jealousy and betrayal turns them to think about, what can we do to undermine Daniel? This is the reward for his faithfulness. And it says, the verse I read to you says, that the only thing they could come up with was to somehow betray him and bring him up to under charges to the ruler because he is faithful to his faith. Wow. Wouldn't you like to be known as a person who can only be brought, the only charge that can be brought against you is that you're faithful to God? That's what happened. And so they convinced Darius, who wasn't aware of the subterfuge, they convinced him to make an official decree, and an official decree of the king could not be, he himself couldn't even change it. And so they convinced him that if he would make an edict that people for 30 days had to bring any vow, any request, any act of worship to him rather than anyone else or any other god. And so what did Daniel do when he knew that this decree had been passed? He continued to be faithful to God. In the face of jealousy, in the face of betrayal, the door to gratitude, as we see in Daniel's example, is the choice to be thankful in any circumstance. In all circumstances. It's a choice. It's not about things going good or not going good. All his life, Daniel practiced gratitude. It says, as was his custom, he continued to do as usual. 3 times a day, he would bow before God, the Most High, and express his gratitude. It was his choice. Sometimes things were going well for Daniel. Sometimes things were not going well. I believe, though it's not recorded specifically in the book, in the early chapters, I believe, based on what we see later, that the day after Daniel and his friends arrived in exile in Babylon, they prayed 3 times and gave thanks to God. You see, it was their choice. It was not about the conditions around them. It wasn't something that they waited to see if God was doing what they wanted and if God had granted all of their wishes. But rather, it was their choice. And I want to say to you this morning, that's the door to gratitude. The door to gratitude is the choice to be thankful in any circumstance, in all circumstances. That doesn't mean that you're ignoring your challenges and problems. When Daniel went up to his upstairs room, to the open windows open to Jerusalem, to give thanks after he heard that the decree had been signed by Darius, that he was placing his own life in danger, what happened was not that he pretended as if or ignored the fact that he was in dire circumstances. It was his choice, regardless, in any circumstance. He wasn't ignoring the challenges. He wasn't ignoring the problems. That's not what this is about. It's not magic thinking. It's not pretending as if what is bad is good. It is recognizing that regardless of my circumstances, I am grateful to the Lord. The choice to be thankful doesn't mean that I don't know that there are bad things in my life. It means that I'm choosing where I will place my priority attention. Because you see, at the same time that it was true that his life was in danger, it was also simultaneously true that he was the benefactor, the recipient of phenomenal blessings from God. That also was true. And he was choosing where he was going to put his priority attention. And his choice was to place his priority attention on his blessings and opportunities. Not to deny the problems, but the choice to put his attention on his blessings. And that's a choice that we may need to make over and over. That's not a once-in-a-lifetime choice. That's a choice we might need to make every morning. When you first wake up, some of you haven't begun to experience this yet. But others here in the room know what I'm talking about when I say you first wake up and it takes a little bit of effort to roll over out of bed. And there's a pain somewhere that you didn't really remember was supposed to be there. Recently, I realized, nobody ever told me this, I realized that all those falls and spills and crashes I've taken in my life that I thought I had recovered from, they didn't go away, they just accumulated. And now they're coming back. And any morning, sometimes in the evening, at the end of the day, right? Some of you know what I'm talking about. The choice to be thankful doesn't mean that I deny that there are challenges, pains, or problems in my life. It means that I also recognize and celebrate there are phenomenal blessings and opportunities in my life, and I'm making a choice where I'm putting my attention. Daniel not only placed his life in danger, he got put in the lion's den. I don't know if you remember that. I stopped before we got there. But they brought him up on charges. The king said, man, I pass this law. I can't go against my own word. So the king said, I hope your living God will take care of you, and put Daniel in the lion's den. And then early the next morning ran out to the lion's den and called out to Daniel. And Daniel, of course, was safe. So it doesn't mean that the lions aren't there. Being thankful doesn't mean that you're not in the lion's den. It doesn't mean that you don't have problems. It doesn't mean that you're pretending you don't have problems. It doesn't mean that you're ignoring your problems. It means that you're paying attention to all of what is true and real, including your blessings and opportunities. You're making the choice to put your priority attention on your blessings and opportunities. The door to gratitude is the choice to be thankful in any circumstance. Let me share with you an example that I came across that I think illustrates this well. About 10 years ago, Paula O'Donnell and her 3 sisters were contemplating approaching Thanksgiving Day, but they were not feeling grateful. Only 2 months before, their mother had died, and their father had died the following month. It had only been a few years that had passed since their great aunt and their great uncle that they loved dearly had passed away. So they're approaching Thanksgiving Day and not particularly feeling thankful. But then Paula had an idea. She thought of something that they might do, and she shared it with her sisters. They loved the idea. So on Thanksgiving Day, before the meal, they gathered with their children around the table. They lit 4 candles and then began to share their favorite memories of their loved ones. They shared their memories of how they loved one another. They talked about their humor, the great family gatherings that they had enjoyed. And then, giving thanks, they thanked God for his generous blessings. And they were grateful. Because you see, they chose to be grateful. What they did didn't bring their lost loved ones back. The loss was still there. The loss was still real. They chose, in addition to recognizing the loss, to put their attention on the blessing. Because they had discovered that the door to gratitude in our lives is the choice to be grateful. Doesn't require the accumulation of good things, and it's not some way of magically changing our sorrows into joy. It's focusing on and celebrating the joy in the midst of the challenge and the problems. That's the door to gratitude. But there's a deeper level. There's a more profound experience of gratitude. You see, the choice to be thankful in any circumstance is the door that gets you up onto the porch, but not the door into the house of gratitude. The door into the house of gratitude is the choice to be thankful for any circumstance. the entrance to being at home with gratitude, where you can dwell in thanksgiving. It's what some people call thanks living. If you only are ready to say thank you to God in any circumstance, then you're up on the porch. But don't you want to get in the house? We live in the house. We entertain on the porch. We enjoy ourselves on the porch. It's a great place to be on the porch. But we dwell in the house. We live in the house. And so if you want to be thankful as a way of life, you have to get into the house. Let me show you what I mean. Look with me, please, at Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1. We're going to start reading from verse 12. You know, this is the Apostle Paul. He's writing to the believers in the city of Philippi. Beginning with verse 12, he writes, "And I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, knows that I am in chains because of Christ. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. It's true that some are preaching out of jealousy and rivalry, but others preach about Christ with pure motives. They preach because they love me, for they know I have been appointed to defend the good news. Those others who do not have pure motives as they preach about Christ, they preach with selfish ambition, not sincerely, intending to make my chains more painful to me. But that doesn't matter. Whether their motives are false or genuine, the message about Christ is being preached either way, so I rejoice. And I will continue to rejoice, for I know that as you pray for me, and the Spirit of Jesus Christ helps me, this will lead to my deliverance. For I fully expect and hope that I will never be ashamed, but that I will continue to be bold for Christ, as I have been in the past. And I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ, whether I live or die." So remember how we get to this place in the Apostle Paul's life. 20 years after that dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus, at the end of his third missionary journey, he travels to Jerusalem. Remember the missionary journeys. God used him to plant and support and sustain and strengthen churches all over what is now Turkey and southeastern Europe, areas of Greece and the islands on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea. God has used him in wonderfully powerful ways. And many churches have come to be strong and great testimonies, great safeguards and bulwarks for the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the end of a marvelous time of ministry, 20 years. When he feels compelled to go to the city of Jerusalem, he takes with him some Gentiles who have become followers of Christ. And when he shows up with them at the temple, there's a riot. People come up against him. He is accosted by the crowd. And for his protection, he is placed in protective custody by the Roman officials. And it literally says, it specifically says that they do this for his protection. It gets so bad, they're not quite sure they're going to be able to protect him in Jerusalem, and so they take him to Caesarea. Caesarea was the Roman capital of that particular province, down the mountain and north of Jerusalem on the Mediterranean coast. And there they place him in custody so that he can present his defense of what occurred. So he speaks before the governor there in Caesarea. He talks to other people. And he's in Caesarea for 2 years. Now here's the guy who's been traveling everywhere that he wants to go, led by the Lord, used in powerful ways to bring people to Christ and to start and strengthen churches. He is now kept for 2 years under guard. And as he's there, he continues to share his testimony. But there are other people who are saying, look at that guy. These are people who are followers of Christ, but they feel jealous of him. And he refers to them in the verses that I read. And there are people who are going, yeah, Jesus Christ is right, but look at Paul. We told you all along he wasn't right. We told you that you couldn't trust him. Look at what he has done to our testimony. And so they're preaching the gospel, but they're speaking against Paul. What does Paul say in the verses that I just read? I will rejoice. It doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Why is he still thankful? Why, after all of this time of great ministry, why isn't he going somewhere on a Mediterranean island to retire? In ease? So he doesn't have any more problems? Because hasn't he earned it? Surely we should expect that he could enjoy the declining years in gratitude and thankfulness and comfort. But that's not what happens. The reward for his faithfulness is he's incarcerated. And you know what happens after this? He ends up finally heading to Rome. They're shipwrecked on the way. They think they're going to die. They finally get to Rome, and he's incarcerated there. But you see, Paul chose to be thankful. I want you to notice, however, notice in the verses that I read to you, he is not merely thankful in these circumstances. He is thankful for these circumstances. He is thankful that he's in chains because he recognizes that he's in Caesarea. And the people that are chained to him are in the central elite guard right in the governor's palace. And he has influence with them. And some of them are coming to faith in Christ. And people all over know that even if they don't trust Christ, that he does. And that's why he's there. And he is seeing even those people who are speaking against him are speaking the gospel of Jesus Christ. And for that reason, perhaps they are emboldened. Maybe when he was free, they weren't bold to preach. But now that they're jealous of him and he's in chains, they're going, hey, we have a reason to talk now. We want to talk down about Paul, but we want to lift up Christ. And Paul says, that's fine, they're lifting up Christ. Because, not merely in spite of, but because I'm in chains. Because this is what I'm experiencing at the end of this life of ministry and testimony. The Apostle Paul was thankful for his circumstances because he saw what God was doing. You see, the door to enduring gratitude, the entrance to thanks living, is the choice to be thankful for every circumstance, good or bad, because God is at work. God is at work to bring about amazing, unexpectedly miraculous results. You want to get in the house? You want to live in gratitude? So that it's not over somewhere toward the end of November, but it's actually your daily, normal experience. It's a choice. It's a choice to be thankful for every circumstance. Because you see that God is at work to bring about amazing, unexpectedly miraculous results. Now, Paul was fortunate in this particular situation because he actually saw what God was doing. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're not fully aware of what it is that God is doing in a circumstance that's uncomfortable or feels unfair. But as we remain faithful, as we remain clear in our testimony before God, as we continue grateful, as we continue to be bold in thanksgiving to God, explicitly to God, he uses that to change hearts, which is the hope of the world. Sometimes it's the little things that we need to be thankful for. Sometimes it's the little annoyances that we want to be thankful for. Here's an illustration that I came across that I thought you might enjoy as I do. This is a prayer from Faye Field. Listen to her prayer of gratitude. I'm thankful that I don't have a clothes dryer. Because if I did, I would miss the experience of taking a full basket of clothes out into the fresh air and the sound of wet sheets flapping in the wind. Some of you have never heard that sound. I have. It's a comforting sound. It's been a long time. I have a clothes dryer. Faye was thankful she didn't. Her prayer continues, I'm thankful that I don't have a microwave oven because I love to watch the turkey crisping and watch the dough become fluffy brown rolls. I'm thankful that I don't have an air conditioner because I probably wouldn't open the windows to hear the chattering blue jays, the gentle rain, or the howling wind. I'm thankful that I don't have wall-to-wall carpeting because I love the shine of polished hardwood. I'm thankful that I don't have a gardener because I wouldn't spend hours on my knees in my flower beds, close to the earth and close to you, Lord, in prayer, giving thanks for the many blessings in my life. Amen. You see, Faye wasn't pretending like the discomforts and inconveniences weren't real. She was giving thanks for those discomforts and inconveniences because she saw how God was using them to accomplish phenomenal blessings. So what I'm saying to you is that when we give thanks to God for our circumstances, good or bad, it doesn't mean that fireworks are going to go off necessarily. It doesn't mean that some kind of life-changing experience might happen, but heart-changing experiences do. When you choose to be thankful for every circumstance, good or bad, that's the door into the house of gratitude. It's summarized really well in the 4th chapter of the book of Philippians. You remember these verses from Apostle Paul. Remember his circumstances as he writes these words. He's still incarcerated in Caesarea at the end of the letter. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again. Rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Tell Him what you need and, at the same time, thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds and dwell in gratitude.